I grew up loving Victorian houses, like, because I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, and then I
Hmm.
escaped to Dallas when I was in my mid-20s, and then finally managed to come out here in May during the strike, which is like, perfect timing.
Right.
But yeah, I grew up loving Victorian houses, and I always like that was one of my little like dreams as a kid. Is like I want to live in a Victorian home because they're just so incredible. And so that was one of the first things I was really digging about the Mistress and whatnot. And you said that was your main inspiration for wanting to start to do that was because you wanted to be able to use your home as a location, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, when we moved in, I knew that I had to shoot something in the house. And then it just kind of slowly but surely came together.
Very cool. So I remember you mentioning that your inspiration for the story basically came from the fears that you had with, getting being engaged and moving into the next phase in your life in general, not just relationship, but in your life. So like how long was that writing process for you in putting the story together and
Well, the process was um it's such a picturesque house. Uh it's really its own character. And so when I first moved into the house, it just permeated my pores being in this house. And I knew I wanted to shoot something in it. And I wasn't really sure what. And then I think I wrote and then we got married and we had a kid. And I started using those fears of the scariness of growing up, like I said before, the fears of marriage and family and all this when you're been a confirmed bachelor for so many years. And and then I took some of the facts about the house that I thought were really interesting. Like the house, which was built in 1894, was built about 3/4 of a mile away. And the original owner had it moved in 1901 using draft horses because they discovered oil on the surrounding properties. So all of a sudden, by 1900, by the turn of the century, there were like a couple dozen giant oil derricks that had sprouted up all around the house. And I have a photograph of this as well,
very cool.
of the house before it was moved. So the owner got fed up and he moved the house to the current location in 1901. Thought that was a really interesting idea. Um, at the time, I had also suffered a very traumatic stalking experience.
Mm.
Uh, th that that in little ways I'm still getting over to this day, but this is going back 10 years or so, or over 10 years. And when we first moved into the house, I still had these residual fears of being stalked.
Yeah.
And so I found myself like looking out the window at every car going by. Very traumatic experience. Anyways, I kind of just like took all of these emotions I was dealing with and put it into a story. And I wrote a rough draft, just kind of for fun, thinking, one day I'll do something with it, but I'm not sure. And then I got a call from uh my producer Rob Paris, who I've worked with before, and he said we want to do a horror film. Do you have anything that like a low budget contained horror film? And that was the fire lit under my ass to
Nice.
really take the script seriously. So then I said, hold on, give me a minute. And I went in and rewrote pretty much the script that we shot. Uh, and so, I had it like in my trunk. I had the idea in my trunk, but it really didn't really blossom until I got a call from a producer saying that they wanted to make something,
Gotcha.
and then it happened relatively quickly.
So, because I know during the pandemic, a lot of people were well, filmmakers because I did the same. I had not because mine was shot on a phone. It was for a Roger Corman competition. And it was very
Oh, cool.
ridiculous. Uh,
Great.
But yeah, so it's like I know a lot of creatives, we did what we could to kind of like move ourselves through it. So was that similar to how you guys started with, or were you already in pre-production and planning to shoot and then the lockdowns happen and that's how you guys.
No, the lockdown, we were already in lockdown when we were in pre-production. There it was yeah, it was full throttle pandemic. Uh yeah, there was no transition. Like we knew what we were up against and we knew what we had to do. We knew we had to follow the very strict protocols, SAG protocols, in terms of testing and distancing and all that. And you know, I kept hearing horror stories of films trying to shoot during the pandemic and them getting shut down at some point. And what, you know, if a low budget film gets shut down, there's a really good chance that it'll never start back up
Yeah,
because it's just too expensive. You don't have the money for that.
right.
We somehow got through the entire shoot on the last day. On the last day, somebody pierced our bubble. I don't remember. One of the crew was hanging out with somebody who tested positive. Wasn't one of our crew, but it was like a friend of the crew. And the rumors spread like wildfire, and we pretty much almost had a mutiny on our hands on the very last day of shooting. And so we did a rapid test. Everybody got tested. Everybody was negative, but we chose to shut down and pick up the last day about 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
And that was very nerve-wracking because, like I said, on a low-budget film, any delay is your worst enemy.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But we came back and we finished it, thankfully.
And that's, actually I forgot, how long did you say you guys were filming for? Because I think I remembered you mentioning how long filming was, but I can't remember it off the top of my
I
head.
think it was 21 or 22 days.
Yeah. And it's such a great film. Like I said, I remember catching wind of it, and then I saw Ray Don Chong had posted on one of the film festivals, like how you guys had done, and I was like, I want to see it.
Oh, good.
So I'm super excited I had a chance to see it. And I know that so I know you are a horror fan. You mentioned some of your earlier inspirations and whatnot. But when you were doing the Q&A, you're very clear in how this was not necessarily a horror film, more of a suspense thriller, which definitely I would agree. But I'm curious because I know like all horror fans have their different perspectives on what is and what isn't horror. So for you, what do you feel defines horror?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I think there are two things. One uh is tone, and the other one is whether or not there is something supernatural going on. Not always. Not always. There are lots of horror films that are not really supernatural. You could take Halloween, for example. Halloween is about a psychologically disturbed child who kills his sister and then is put in an insane asylum for 20 years and then comes back and goes on a killing spree.
Right.
There's nothing supernatural about it.
Yeah.
But it feels supernatural because he's the boogeyman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jaws is a horror film. It's not supernatural. So I mean, there are obviously exceptions to the rules. The Shining. The interesting thing about The Shining, which is one of the great, I would call it a horror film, one of the great horror films, but there really is, in that whole film, there is only one moment where something supernatural happens. In that whole film, only one moment where the laws of nature are suspended. Like, we see stuff, but we can't trust Jack Nicholson's character,
Right.
because we don't trust him. The kid, we don't trust the kid. He's got imaginary friends. That what he sees or what's going on in his mind may or may not be real. Same thing with Jack Nicholson. when he goes into the ballroom and the bartender's there, we don't really know if the bartender's there.
Right.
That could be in his mind. There's many scenes like that throughout the Shining, where we're dealing with unreliable narrators and we don't know if this is supernatural or just filtered through their disturbed minds. There's only one moment in that film that defies the laws of nature. And do you know what that is? Are you familiar with enough with the movie?
I remember enough of it. I know that, don't judge me. I know that we have different perspectives on, because you don't at all believe in what would be considered supernatural or anything like that, correct?
I don't I mean I'm a believer who needs to be convinced.
Gotcha.
So I don't believe until I'm convinced.
I gotcha. And yeah, I've had so many different experiences that for me it's hard to not believe because I've because I used to consider myself, like, I was raised by, I'm Afro-Chicana, and so I was raised with my Mexican mom and my family, and they're very, very superstitious, very, very, lots of ritual and things like that are
Sure.
involved in our upbringing, our beliefs. And so I reached a point, like, I think I was probably in my late teens, and I was like, okay, it's all bullshit. So I had this moment where I just didn't believe in anything. And even though I had experiences as a kid, I have dreams that tend to be actual things, like they're like premonitions in a way.
Oh,
I've
wow.
had that since I was a kid. And
Yeah.
when you get to be a certain age, you just kind of start wondering, it's like, well, maybe it was just a coincidence, even though there's no way it was coincidence, but it was kind of like like a trauma in a way. So I was denying a lot of it. And so there's been like this whole process, and I finally gotten to a point where again, there's things that I can't deny. So I tend to have a very wide perspective on what I would see as potentially supernatural or what isn't. And then, like you said, throughout the film, there is, like, you can't really tell, who to trust or whatnot. So
Right.
that's why I'm
Right.
like, I don't know how to answer, because we might have a different opinion on it.
So in The Shining, the only moment where objectively speaking something supernatural happens is when Jack Nicholson's character is let out of the the dry storage room, where Shelley Duvall locks him in that room. You remember, she brains him with the baseball bat,
Yep.
drags him into in that storage room and locks the door,
Yeah.
and then leaves him there. Now, the only way he could have gotten out is if somebody let him out.
Right.
And that's the only place where the laws of nature are defied in that movie. That
Right.
can't be explained by a hallucination or by an unreliable narrator.
Right. And that's
So,
the thing, is nobody else knew he was there. So it's like,
right. Yeah. And there was nobody else, no other physical people in the hotel except for the mother and daughter and him. So, and in that instance, somebody let him out. And that's the only the true supernatural moment where an object is moved by a force that isn't human. So yeah, so what makes a horror film? I think it comes down to the perception of the paranormal. Like, even in Halloween, we perceive the paranormal, even though it might not be paranormal. And there's little hints of it. Like, at one point, he's shot and they look down and he's gone.
And yeah,
Right. Like,
take a shot. That's it.
I mean, can he not be killed, or was he just wounded? We don't know. And that's okay. That makes it a horror film.
Yeah.
And The Shining, it's our desire to believe in ghosts that makes it a horror film. I mean, even if you take out the one moment that does prove there's something else in that hotel besides those three people.
Right.
So I would say I made this to be a horror film that pulls the rug out from underneath the audience and shows them it's not a horror film. Much in the vein of Psycho, which was a big influence for this. Is I wanted to make my take on Psycho.
I definitely felt that.
yeah, to the point where that was a major, a major, major thematic and creative factor when I was coming up with it. I mean, look at Psycho. Psycho's a horror movie, right? I would call it a horror movie.
Yep.
There's nothing paranormal about it.
Right.
Um, there's a big, scary old Victorian house in it that has nothing to do with the horrors
Yeah.
that are involved. Much like this movie, you've got this crazy old house, but really the house is it's just a house,
House, yeah.
like in Psycho. And so Psycho was a big influence tonally, to the point where I paid homage to Psycho in many different ways, including our main character's wardrobe. His costumes were all based on all the things that Norman Bates wore in Psycho.
Nice.
So I had my costume designer, Sierra Ray, study Psycho and come up with modern twists on every costume change that Anthony Perkins had in the
Very
film.
cool. I might have missed that. I was looking at a lot of like the play with the light and shadow, and then tonally is those are the main things that I picked up, and I definitely want to do my best not to give any spoilers because I really want everyone to see it because it's just I love a lot of the play that happens in it because I was sitting there, I was like, wait a minute, is it? No, is it? And it's just like a lot of back and forth. It's like, is it? Isn't it? And it's not because sometimes I think to me that's the mark of a great film and a great director is when they play with you like that and you're still invested. You still want to know. So I don't know how or what it is that there are sometimes people try that and it just keeps dragging on. It's just frustrating. It's like, can we just get somewhere? But
Right,
can we just
right.
can you show us something to kind of prove? But yeah, it was really enjoyable. And then yeah, the ending especially, I was like, gotcha. So obviously you knew where you were going with it when you wrote it. Did you have any idea how it might be received? Because some of the questions that I heard in the Q&A were a little surprising to me because I felt like it was pretty clear in what happened and how it was how it unraveled. But did you I don't know, how did you think that audiences might receive it or what they might take away from it?
So very important to remember that the audience is smarter than you. The audience is smarter than me. So I'm so and at the same time, you're making a movie, and if a movie is done well, no matter how like meandering or slowly it's paced, every single moment counts, is adding up. That's how you're thinking as a director.
Mhm.
That there's no downtime. There should never be a point in any movie where like you feel like you can get up and go to the bathroom and not miss anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And and like if I'm in a theater and I see somebody get up to go to the bathroom, it drives me crazy because no matter when they leave, they're going to miss some bit of information that they need by design to appreciate the whole experience.
She's not in SAG. She can talk about her part in the movie.
Oh my god, she's very excited. She lost another tooth.
It's awesome though.
So I keep getting interrupted mid thought. Yeah, so you really want every moment to count, even if it doesn't feel like it's counting, but it is counting because the evidence is stacking up. It's like a court case. I'm giving the audience evidence that's leading to a particular verdict, but I also know, because we've all seen the same movies, we've all seen the same horror movies, we all know the tropes and the cliches of these movies, and one of the things that I set out to do was to embrace all of these tropes and cliches, and and show the audience something that they think they've seen before. So we're in familiar territory. A young couple moves into an old house. He's a writer. That's a cliche right there. That's a trope. Um, but how am I going to take these tropes and try and do something different and unexpected? And that was the challenge.
was to take all of my favorite moments and tropes from horror films and pay homage to them, and sometimes more obvious than others, sometimes more subtle, never tongue in cheek, but always to use that to manipulate the audience in the direction I wanted them to go, so that I because I know the audience is so smart, I need to stay a step ahead of the audience, but I need the audience to think that they're staying a step ahead of me. So it's like kind of a game of cat and mouse. You know,
Yeah.
I want the audience to think they've got it figured out, until they don't.
Yeah.
And that's all by design, and you hope it works, because it's a bit of a gamble. But I think it, from my experiences with audiences, I think it works. And I think sometimes, people, they might, and like in any movie, you miss something, and you miss something, and so it confuses you, but you still get it, you still like it, but that's why you should see it 5 or 6 times.
For sure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of watching my favorites like over and over and over. And that's
Yeah,
the thing too, is when you really appreciate a film and you watch it multiple times, it's, at least for me, since it feels like you're watching it again for the first time when you discover something new, and it's like, oh man, it's like it can kind of change like the whole story, like depending on what you pick up that you might have missed before, or just little things. Or in sometimes life experiences too. Like you watch something when you're in a completely different stage in your life, and you watch it again, it's like, wow, I didn't pick up on those things. So, but do you plan on doing more like or do you have any other types of thriller or horror that you want to do, or do you?
yeah. I have several. I mean, the next movie I make, I will be hopefully, in a similar vein as this. I'm I'm very much into the idea of um debunking the paranormal by still making horror films that you think are about the paranormal but aren't.
Yeah.
And because I think that human beings are the scariest creatures, scariest monsters on earth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the only thing scarier than a human being is our imagination. But if you take the imagination out of it, you're left with nothing but scary human beings.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm playing with right now, is the idea of how to create suspense and horror in a world where there are no ghosts or monsters.
Yeah, and that's definitely a unique space to kind of play in, because it's like when people are putting out new horror films, which definitely I'm not like, oh, I'm tired of new horror, but there are so many things that you can just keep redoing and redoing and redoing. And so it's nice when people are able to like take something and just completely either subvert or do something completely different, you know,
Right.
to keep the audience entertained and give them an experience. Like that's the main thing, is I just, especially with how pricey movies can be these days. It's like I want to be able to go and there's got to be something that I can enjoy or take away from it. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I tend to love indie produced films more, because there's a lot more heart into it. There's a lot more effort. There's a lot more thought, as opposed to, yeah, let's do, this fifth sequel of this movie that, has just been basically the same thing with the same gimmicks and the same, gags and stuff like that. So.
Mhm.
So just because, like I said, I'm basically a micro budget filmmaker, so I always think from that perspective. Do you have any advice that you would want to give to budding filmmakers that would want to, that are wanting to make their first feature or anything like that?
Well, I mean, my first feature was a micro budget feature. We shot it for $10,000, which I think classifies as micro budget. And it was shot on film, on 16 millimeter, Super 16, and everybody worked for free, and the money just went to cover lab costs, processing. Um, we got a lot of food donated. I mean, you I mean, all the films I've made have been considered low budget by Hollywood standards. Some were big budget indies. I made a film for Netflix a few years ago that was a fairly large budget for an indie film, but still, you know, under $10 million. So it's still a small budget, relatively speaking.
Right.
You know, my advice is, I have no real advice, because if you want to make a movie, then you'll figure out how to make a movie, and if you have no money, then you know you'll figure out. You know, when I started making films, there were no cell phones, let alone iPhones.
Yeah. Same.
If you wanted to make a movie, you had to get a film camera. There was no alternative. You know, there really literally was no alternative. If you wanted to make a movie, you had to shoot it on film. There was no other way to do it. Nowadays, you know, people have, you know, they have professional quality digital cameras, and they do it. I would say I mean, this is going to sound really kind of small, but it's huge. If you are going to make a no budget movie, the thing you should be worrying about most is the sound.
Absolutely.
It is know how to record actors either through boom mic or lavalier mics, but that's the most important aspect, because you can make a movie that doesn't look very good, but if it doesn't sound good, then you're not going to sell it, or audiences aren't going to buy it. You really need to have clear sound, and that comes from recording the sound separately. You know, having a separate soundtrack that you can work with, but that's not expensive either, especially nowadays.
Right. Yeah. I started with the digital 8. That's how we were making our films, and then
Are those the tapes, the little tapes?
yeah. And then
Right.
we started using DSLR. But yeah, that was my painful lesson, was audio. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't use the camera mics. You gotta use a mic. You know, there was a brief period in the early 2000s where there was a movement that was embraced by a lot of big filmmakers. Lars von Trier embraced it. It was using those digital videos, the small tape videos, video cameras, and shooting movies that way. And there was a company called Indigent. I don't know if you remember this. This might have been before your time. Indigent was a company, and their model was that every budget would be $100,000. Everybody would get paid, from the actors to the crew, the same rate. Like, it was like $100 a day. And they produced a lot of movies. You should look them up. One movie that did really well was called Pieces of April, and it had a big cast. It had Katie Holmes.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. And it looks terrible because it's shot on the video, so it doesn't really look like a movie, but it's a good movie. It's not bad. And they had good sound, but it had a great cast. It had Oliver Platt, Katie Holmes. I forgot who the mother was.
I've seen it, but I remember liking it.
Yeah. It might have been like Laura Linney or somebody like that. And but they all worked for $100 a day, and it was shot on video. And for a while, for a brief period, that was the future of independent film, was to shoot it on video. There were a lot of movies made in that era like that. What happened was the film technology, cinematic technology improved to the point where people didn't have to make movies on those crappy video cameras anymore. So you could use a digital camera that moved at 24 frames per second and looked like film and was really cheap. And you can do that now. So you don't have to, do a 30 frame per second video movie or whatever, or shooting on PAL, which is what a lot of them did. Which I think is like 25 or 26 frames. But yeah, I mean, people have certain expectations when going to see a movie, either at home or in the theaters. And the number one rule is it needs to feel like a movie. And what that means is the images you're seeing are moving at 24 frames per second, because that's how we've been trained to know the difference between a movie and a soap opera, for example.
Right. Yep. Or a newscast. That's been some weird ones where I'm like, this feels like a newscast.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, to go off on another related side rant here. There's something that's been going on for the last several years with new TVs, where TVs now have a function where you can make everything look like a newscast or a soap opera or a sporting event.
Yeah.
And so people are watching movies that are like, de-interlaced, kind of like video interpretations of film, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, progressive scan.
Crazy. And it drives me crazy because some people don't even see it, they don't even know, they don't even recognize it. And I can't watch a movie if that is the setting. And in fact, if there's a bar, I'm so crazy. Like if I'm in a bar and there's a movie playing in the bar that I like and they have it on that setting, I will ask the bartender to please fix it. And they don't know what I'm talking about either. They just think I'm crazy. I went to a screening at a friend's house a couple years ago. He built like a screening room in his loft, and he had a bunch of people there to watch a great movie that I loved. And the movie started, and I saw he had the setting all messed up. And I made him stop it and call his audiovisual guy and find out how to fix the setting. They all thought I was crazy, but I couldn't watch it.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I actually get annoyed when I see people bitching about the video quality. Oh, it looks like crap. It's an expensive movie. It looks like crap. And I'm like, turn off your progressive scan. It's how you have your TV
the
set.
progressive scan.
Yeah.
And nobody knows how to do it. And some TVs don't even make it easy to find that.
Oh, that's irritating.
and like sometimes the default setting when you get it home is that progressive scan.
Ugh, not a fan.
Yeah. And you think about all the work that filmmakers put in to creating 24 frames per second, only for it to be obliterated on somebody's, Sony TV from Walmart or Best Buy.
Oh, I wanted to ask, where did that camera come from that was in the film? Like, is that one of yours, or is it something that you like a prop that you borrowed?
The plate cam was a turn of the century plate camera, and that was from a prop house.
So cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that was a prop. But it's an actual camera. It's an antique, but it was a rental. And there were several things like that were rentals. The furnace in the basement, although that's my actual basement, the wood burning furnace didn't exist. That was brought in.
I was wondering about that too, and I wanted to ask at the Q&A about the basement, but I'm like, am I weird for asking about that? But I love all of the aspects when it comes to putting a film together. Like I've been on sets, I've worked sets, and different budgets and things like that. Mine were like I said, micro budget, but actually being on bigger productions and just seeing everything come together, I'm always excited. It's like I have to try my best to be reserved, because for me it's like making magic.
It's very exciting. It is magic. It really is.
And people just look at me like I'm like some kind of unprofessional. I'm like, don't stop on my joy. Just because you're miserable and the industry has sucked the soul out of you doesn't mean that it's like that for me. So
yeah, it's true. It's something that you never. Luckily, you never stop getting excited when you go to a set. Whatever you. I mean, I imagine. I mean, I've worked other jobs on sets. And it's always exciting. If you can see right here, can you see
the horror podcast? Oh, wait, she's right now on?
Yeah, she's on right now.
Hi.
Her name is Tiffany Warren. This is Fred Stoller.
I was in a very bad horror movie. Are you a horror aficionado?
I'm fairly much a horror and aficionado. It just kind of depends on what area we're talking about. But I'm familiar with who you are.
You know Fred Stoller. Oh, look at that, Fred! You got a fan.
The first horror movie for the Animal Planet Network.
Oh, were you the last girl standing?
No, it was called The Lamp. Something Killer Lake. It was not a classic, and I'm not very proud. Christopher Lloyd was in it, and Shannon Doherty. I forgot what it was called.
If it was killer animals, those are those are the ones that I kind of tend to stay away from.
You didn't like Cocaine Bear?
I haven't seen Cocaine Bear, but that's a slight exception because it's based on a true story. So I want to see that.
Movies are psychological. I grew up loving the Twilight Zone. I love things that are more like Jacob's Ladder. Would you consider that a horror movie?
I definitely would. I
Yeah.
love Jacob's Ladder.
It wasn't monsters, but I love movies like this Sixth Sense and Jacob's Ladder, where he comes to peace. The happy thing is he's dead at the end. You know, that's him, but he finds peace. I love horror. I only love it not. I don't love I like when something transcends the genre. Like, I'm not really a horror fan, but I love movies. It doesn't matter if it's a horror movie. My other favorite horror movies is The Stepfather. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, actually, and Stepfather was a pretty terrifying one for me when my mother was dating.
Oh, oh my God.
And my favorite horror movie is An American Werewolf in London.
Mm.
I respect the story and the effects in that one. I'm not big on werewolves though.
Okay, I just like that. I like that he was tormented and trying to find peace because he didn't want to be a werewolf.
Yeah.
That sexy nurse looking after him, and I thought it was a classic with the music and everything. So
It's a good one. That's John Landis.
yes, that was. He probably got the Michael Jackson thing as a result of that.
I think he actually did Michael Jackson's Thriller afterward, because he used some of the same wolf components
Right.
in that video. Which, by the way, Thriller was shot 1 block away from us in the same neighborhood, Evangelino Heights.
So I was looking for I was trying to find the video on demand the information because I wanted to be able to plug that into the review and I couldn't find it. But I found all kinds of weird things, like how your film has been summarized on Roku. You might want to like get with somebody on that.
So the Roku, that the summary is all messed up.
It's wrong and it's trash. That's all I can say. I remember. It's literally like 1 or 2 sentences and it's complete. I can't even. There's nothing about it encompasses at all what the film is. Not even close. Not even like a misdirection.
I'm gonna send a message to the people and find out what the hell's going on. I haven't seen it. I know it's on. I mean, the people that have seen it so far have seen it on Apple TV, iTunes, Amazon, and then it's on a few other places. But the main ones are Apple and iTunes, I think.
I tried finding it on Amazon and it gave me something completely different because I wanted to watch it again. But I'll
yeah, I mean, it might because it came out last week. It might take some time to get on Amazon. I know that people are watching it on Apple and iTunes. So I don't know if you don't have an Apple TV, I guess you can't watch it that way.
I have Apple TV, so I'll
yeah, it's definitely there.
Okay, very cool.
It's definitely there. I've gotten like live people have sent me clips of the movie while they were watching it, so I know it's there.
Very cool. Okay.
But the Roku thing's disturbing. I don't understand what happened there.
Roku itself is kind of weird and shady to me.
Yeah, I don't understand, but it's all a big mess.
Yeah. So alrighty, yeah, that was the main thing, is I wanted to figure out what the video on demand was and ask about the camera because I'm a little camera nerd and I was like, that is, and antiques. I love antiques. So
yeah, a lot of the antiques were rented. The Edison cylinder player was rented. the furnace and the camera, the plate camera.
Very, very cool. Well, I'm also glad to hear that you as well feel excited, and every time you step onto a set, that's always a good thing to know. Because, like I said, I usually get funny looks. I'm like, "Is what's nothing wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you."
Nobody gets it. No, a lot of people end up working in restaurants or cafes or wherever they can get a job, and it's not necessarily because they love restaurants or cafes. It's because they need a job. But nobody gets a job, even being the lowest paid PA on a film set. Nobody's doing it because they needed a job as much as they want to work in movies.
Right.
Like that's a real choice. You don't fight to get a job as a PA just because you need a job. Everybody needs a job, sure, but you're doing it because that's what you want. That's the world you want to be in, and it's exciting down the line, from the most jaded camera operator and assistant camera all the way to the PA. People want, they want to work in movies and work in film or TV or whatever, commercials.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have much of anything else. I'm really glad that I had a chance to talk with you and everything else in between. And it was really wonderful getting to meet Betsy and see her little her missing tooth.
Her missing tooth, yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me, and keep in touch.
Absolutely. You have a good rest of your day and stay out of the pond, the mud and the goose poop.
The goose droppings. Yes. Very good. See you later.